right now. Man, let's not leave our special guest in the shadows anymore. It's no fun having him hang out down there. We're super excited to have him here. This chat is Ian Parker. What is up, dude? How's it going, man?
That's quite an intro. That's probably my favorite picture. But in the spirit of transparency, I lost that parlay that literally is showing right there. I think it was my first PFL show. The biggest favorite crashed out and made me look absolutely terrible. But I appreciate the intro. Happy to be here. Let's have some fun.
Let's go.
Hell yeah, dude. Hey, W photo. At least if you lost your bet, at least you look good doing it, you know? And that's the only photo I can find of you on the internet. And that
the only one I try to keep on there for a reason.
Yeah, it makes sense, brother. Well, as I said, that's Ian Parker from ESPN. We're going to be talking all about the PFL today, but a master of all things fighting. Before we dive into these two major events this weekend over in Saudi Arabia, I want to know, who is your favorite MMA fighter of all time? They could currently be fighting still. They could be retired, male, female. I'm not a huge. I got into UFC. Well, I got into MMA like a little over a year ago. So I'm fairly new to the market, but I'm a big UFC guy now and big MMA guy now, and I have a couple of my favorites. But who's your go-to? Who's your favorite fighter of all time?
Man, that's so tough, right? Because when you look at someone like the UFC, there's been so many different fighters over the years. You even have guys outside the UFC like a Fedor Emelianenko, who's a huge favorite. I mean, you got to love people like a Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell, Rampage Jackson, Wanderlei Silva. Then you got the Chael Sonnens now. I mean, look, and you have your BJ Penns. It's crazy. Currently, right now, oh, man, it's hard not to love Alex Poatan right now. What he is doing this year is unbelievable. He is breaking records. He just loves to fight. He's doing it in dramatic fashion. It's amazing. From a female standpoint, got to love Amanda Nunes, what she did. She's been around for a long time. Double champ, retired. I think she's coming back, which will be a lot of fun. You know, but this sport, the growth of it has been tremendous. I love that. The UFC, the PFL, Bellator, there's just so much for the fans to consume. And just bring on the violence, you know?
We have our other show around these parts, man, called The Violence Report. We love the fucking violence around here. So you came to the right spot, man. So we are going to be talking about PFL today for the most part. And Shags had a question just for some of the chat that might be a little bit newer to the PFL.
Sure.
So go ahead, Shags.
Yeah, definitely. I'll admit I'm more of an MMA casual when it comes to watching and enjoying. But you gotta love two guys getting in a ring and just trying to beat the hell out of each other. But what are kind of the main differences between the PFL and the UFC that you've seen covering it?
Well, at the end of the day, it's really the format of what the PFL is trying to do to be different. They call themselves a season, so they have 2 rounds of a season where you get points based on the finish, the round, or if it goes to a decision. Second round, same thing, and that's how they determine their playoffs. You know, with the UFC, it's just rankings. Yep. PFL is trying to be a little bit different, but from a standpoint, it's the same level of competition. It's all professional MMA. There's been guys from the UFC that have come over to the PFL and have not done well. They've lost. There's been guys who've gone from PFL to UFC and done well. You know, what the PFL really does is it gives people another alternative. You know, if you're going into free agency with the UFC, as much as we know they're the mega, they're the big brand, you know, that's where everyone wants to go. There is another option on the ESPN platform, and PFL is that option.
Awesome. Love it.
Yeah, man. They also have different gloves. I think the ring is a little bit different too, with the kind of the setup of some of those things as well. There's some other technical differences just from like an in-fight perspective.
Yeah, right? The technology, they're trying to get a little crazy with the technology, with the smart cage. They do like the fastest strike, the most force, which is fun if you're like a super nerd with that stuff. Sometimes it doesn't matter when you're fighting. They also try to do some AI scoring, which if you become a fan of MMA, the judges, they judge fights like this anyway, so why not have AI do it, I guess?
Sure.
But yeah, PFL is just they're trying to find ways to be a little bit different, make their mark, and they do have some really good fighters there. They have guys that I believe could go to the UFC and be very successful. And like I said, it just gives someone else another place to land. So if you get cut from the UFC or in free agency, they don't want to re-sign you, your fighting career is not over. There are other places to go.
Well, that's a wonderful transition because we have one of the bigger names from UFC
Yeah.
who is coming this weekend, which is the main event, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But let's have a look at the card over in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, the Battle of the Giants is the big one we'll talk about in a second. But I'm actually kind of interested a little bit more to hear about your thoughts on this this secondary, the co-main event, this women's featherweight fight between Larissa Pacheco and Chris Cyborg. Talk a little bit about kind of your thoughts on what you think is going to happen there.
Yeah, I think outside of someone like Amanda Nunes, I think you're sitting at two of the best female fighters in the sport. You have someone, Larissa Pacheco, who is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. You just haven't really seen her use it because she's been knocking people out left and right. And you have someone in Chris Cyborg who could be known as the best female fighter of all time in that conversation with Amanda. She's won a belt in every organization. She's coming for this one, specializing in Muay Thai kickboxing, but also a black belt in jiu-jitsu. What's interesting to me is when I first looked at this, I had to do a double take, fellas, because I don't know why Chris Cyborg is the underdog here. It's a little throwy offy for me, and that's a made-up saying, but I made that up. Pacheco, younger, but she's not fighting the level of competition that Cyborg has. And there's been other fights in this division, early in the season against Julia Budd, for example. Pacheco went to a decision. She also knocked out someone, Yelena Kolesnik, who she's knocked out about 17 times throughout her PFL career. So fighting someone in Cyborg who can match her in the aggression, the physical strength, who's been there before, I have a hard time believing that Cyborg is the underdog. She is a little bit older, hasn't slowed down a bit. For me, this is a dog play. If Pacheco does win, that's great. I still think win or lose, both women are up there. Pacheco's coming off that win over Kayla Harrison. Kayla did beat her twice, but Pacheco got it the third time, which shows a lot in the improvement in her game. But very hard to bet against Cyborg. This may be the first time that she's an underdog in an MMA fight like ever. And I'm going to roll with her here.
Our buddy who caps UFC when we do the violence report, the amount of times he pitches like plus 200, plus 250, plus 300 dogs is almost every week. Because sometimes the number doesn't mean a whole lot of jack shit. You just got to look at the fighters and kind of break down what you think what's going to happen in the ring and hope that it happens. He actually smacked one last week, plus 150, plus 160. Doesn't matter. Just got to take the best fighter sometimes.
You know what? It's interesting with fighting, right? So what I try to do is, my strategy is I try to not look at the lines at first. Although at this point, I know who's going to be a big favorite, whatever it is. But for me, being someone who, is on ESPN, giving out picks for each sport, it's not responsible for me to give out a minus 300 favorite on the money line, right? Or a minus 400, because if you lose, you're screwed the rest out. You're chasing that I'm the worst on planet Earth and all the trolls come out to play. So, I kind of will level my base off at minus 200. That's the highest I'll go on a money line play. And if I'm really confident that play can go above it, I'll go method of victory. I'll go prop, and I'll even look to the over-unders, because if you're giving out this advice, you got to be responsible. So to your point, yeah, look, a lot of guys play dogs because it's still MMA. You're still wearing these baby gloves. Anything can happen. We've seen underdogs happen. Last week, you did hit a couple of dogs. Brendan Royval was there. You had Sabatini was a good play for those that took him by sub, but then the rest were favorites, right? So it's an interesting way to play it. For me, though, I just happen to think that between these two women, Chris Cyborg is the better fighter. And the fact that we're getting plus money, cherry on top.
Absolutely. I saw one thing before we move on to the main event. Did you know that Cyborg started out as a professional handball player in Brazil? And then she got poached by somebody to be a professional fighter. And then obviously it turned out pretty well for her in her career.
When it comes to athleticism, nothing with Chris Cyborg would surprise me. Ever since she came into the sport, she's been an absolute monster. Years and years and years ago, the big main event where I think the women arrived, almost like that Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner moment, was Gina Carano versus Chris Cyborg in Strikeforce. And Carano was the marketable, attractive kickboxer who was getting knockouts. And then you had Chris Cyborg, who was that savage. That was like nobody wanted to fight her. And she went in there and destroyed Gina. And from that moment on, just has not looked back. So it does not shock me that she was a professional in another sport, because she's just that damn athletic.
Hell yeah. All right, chat. Drop your questions if you have some. We're going to move on to the main event. But before we let Ian go, if you guys have any questions about PFL or any other fighting stuff you want to know before he gets out of here, just drop them in the chat and we'll try to bring them up on the screen. But let's get to the main one. Let's get to the big boys. Should be a fun one, man. Ngannou versus Ferreira. Ferreira plus 270 on the money line right now. Ngannou hasn't fought in UFC or MMA in like 2 or 3 years at this point. Got his ass kicked by Anthony Joshua. What's your take on this fight, man?
I'm glad you said that so the bosses don't call me and feel like I'm being negative towards Francis, right? Listen, he got knocked out pretty bad by Anthony Joshua, and
Oh, he did.
that was the reality. And I think it's interesting how soon he's coming back. You know, not fighting for a long time in MMA because he had that knee surgery. And that last fight against Cyril Gane, he became Francis Nurmagomedov. He was all grappling, no striking, but it was smart. That was the way to play it. And I'll be honest, guys, if he could do that here, that's how I think he wins, because Ferreira, although is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, he's really not good off his back. And if Francis puts him there, he can hold him there, he can land shots. But man, this number, talking about barking dogs at plus 270, it's hard to not take the younger, more athletic, bigger guy who has the hand speed, who's got good boxing. I think if he touches Francis' chin early, it's going to be a really tough time for Francis. I mean, Francis really has to come out there, go forward, and either throw with reckless abandon, or he's got to take the fight to the ground. But that minus 320 is way too heavy. So if you take Francis, you got to take him by TKO or KO. If you want to get crazy and take him by submission, I don't think that'll happen, but it's a fun prop. However, for me, Renan Ferreira at plus 270, I feel like that's the play.
Our buddy Trizzy, who covers, like we were talking about with fighting, covers like guys, you know, when they get chinned, when you get that bell rung a couple times, the bell gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
You know, like when you get popped, you know, it's not as hard to get popped again. And I mean, he got rocked by Josh. I'll say it again because you can't say it apparently.
No, I can say it. It is
smoked, dude.
It is what you know. What it's interesting coming off that Tyson Fury fight. A lot of people thought like, all right, he did better than we expected. Maybe Tyson just let up, didn't want to take anything away. Because look, Francis is a phenomenal athlete, right? But when you go from not boxing to boxing the best of the best, guys that carry your type of power but are more technical, have been in there before. Man, Anthony Joshua made that look easy. And then look what just happened to Anthony Joshua, right? He just gets knocked out by Dubois. So it's so weird. You know, I give credit to Francis because he really doesn't have to fight. He's made more than enough money in boxing. He has nothing to prove here. Maybe it's the changing of the guard, because if Renan Ferreira wins, you got to really look at him as one of the baddest guys on the planet at heavyweight and take him seriously, because Francis is still no joke, even after 3 years of being inactive.
Just a quick question about
fire away.
A theory thing.
Okay.
Do you believe that the PFL, and this doesn't have to do with like making a decision on which one they would rather have win, but as you mentioned, younger guy, and Ngannou's on kind of the back half or maybe the more twilight portion of his career. Do you think that the league would prefer a guy like Ferreira to get the job done here, kind of build him up and be the guy in the division right now?
You know what? I don't know if. Look, in MMA, it's so hard to put your eggs in a basket, right? Look at the UFC with Conor McGregor. Because if I were to say to you, who's the biggest star of the UFC? People say Conor. I say, it's Dana White, right?
Facts.
That's just, for me, how it goes. Dana's still there. He controls the marketing. He's the one on social media. Conor gets attention, but if he doesn't fight, it is what it is. I think for the PFL, it comes down to, I mean, look, if Francis wins, then the next question is, all right, who fights Francis next that's as... Not, you know, it doesn't have to be as marketable. If Renan wins, you're going to have, and it wins in like crazy fashion, like the most insane knockout we've ever seen, right? You got to promote him as that monster that took out Francis Ngannou. And you have to really build this guy up into like a Thanos God type level, because the PFL don't have the biggest names, right? Where the PFL, in my opinion, will succeed is the format. Right? Not relying on having to build up stars. Because look, I think even Shag, you said you're a casual fan, but if PFL is on a night that UFC is not on, right? They're on Thursday or Friday, your ass is watching it. You're betting it. Okay, 100%. Without a doubt. So what do we do here? All right, so you know we're not going to get a Alex Pereira on a Thursday night. Okay, but if we get these two heavyweights that are going there to knock each other out as fast as possible, sign me up. I don't care about the names, right? And then guess what? That's how you build these guys up. So to answer your question, I mean, look, obviously Francis is the more popular fighter. You can market fights around him, but at the end of the day, how many fights does Francis have left as well? So at some point, you want the changing of the guard, or you want something just to show that you have guys in this organization that can compete with what people consider the best with other organizations, if that makes sense.
I mean, 100%. I mean, guy's 6'8". He has incredible kicking too. Like I was looking at some information, just kind of talking about the ways that Ferreira can kind of get the job done here, because Ngannou probably hasn't beat in the grappling department. But I mean, Ferreira's so good at his kicks and kind of keeping people at distance that some of those takedowns might be a little bit harder from a BJJ perspective. But So what's your favorite bet from this entire card, from this entire event? If you had to take one, take me home, tuck me in peace over in Saudi Arabia, what are you taking?
Yeah, it's Antonio McKee Jr. over Paul Hughes. It's the first fight, the curtain jerker of the pay-per-view. Reason why I say this, and first off, McKee Jr., in my opinion, should be a -3 to a -500. He's sitting at -180. I don't know if he lost a toe or a leg, or or if he's violently ill and people found out about this. I have no idea. Paul Hughes was one, if not number 2 prospect in the world for this weight class. PFL outbid the UFC. They got him in. But you're throwing him in against someone, Antonio McKee Jr., who just ran through Clay Collard, which nobody does that. And Antonio McKee Jr. at 155 is probably top 10 in the world, regardless of organization. At 145, probably top 5 or 6. So you're asking a top prospect who's never fought on, a Bellator level. And this is not a knock on Cage Warriors. Cage Warriors is an awesome organization, but guys go from there into the UFC, PFL, and they start off on the prelims. This guy's jumping into the deepest waters possible. And -180, that fits under that -200 number, fellas. I'm all over Antonio McKee Jr. That is my favorite play.
Hell yeah, dude.
You're speaking my language with that juice, man. I got no problem paying that juice. I know a lot of people don't.
Bad.
A lot of people stay away, but -180, if it's the right play, it's the right play.
To me, yeah, you know what? Look, it's hard sometimes when I do my shows. I give it a bunch of -175s, -165s. But to me, it's like if you're betting football and you want to bet the money line instead of taking these spreads, that's why people are teasing. That's why they're parlaying. Look, for me, if you want to do a parlay, I'll even give you guys a little parlay to go home with, right? You could take Raytheon Stotts, you could take Johnny Eblin, and you could take McKee Jr. if you don't like that -180. So you're getting a -700, a -550, -180. You're getting plus odds. No juice. I think all 3 of those guys get it done as well.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Our buddy calls them bozo packs. Nothing wrong with a nice little bozo pack.
I call them Parker's Parlay. It feels better.
Oh, there it is. There's your Parker's Parlay, chat. Get after it. Love to see it, man. All right, man. Well, it's been awesome talking with you about the PFL and some violence. I'll have to get you back on and have you talk some more on the violence report and talk some more violence. I know that it would be a fun time to have you back, man. Before we let you rock and roll, I know we asked you this before. What's your thoughts on this Monday Night Football game tonight? You got any thoughts between the Jets and the Bills?
Feels a little trappy, doesn't it? Like, why is this almost a pick 'em? Are we really saying the Jets are going to become this magical team because they fired the head coach? All of a sudden, Aaron, Rodgers is going to go back to form. I don't know. If you're between this number, I think I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills here. Josh Allen's playing better. I think he's got more. I mean, listen, Rodgers has the weapons. It's not the head coach. Not that I think Saleh is all that great. But come on, man. You're still on the field. You're the one making the plays. He's just not connecting with Wilson. Breece Hall, you're going to end up running him into the ground, making him do everything. Their defense is not what we thought they were going to be this year, outside of a couple of games. I mean, maybe also Josh Allen, anytime touchdown seems to always be a play that we like to play, right? But for me, if I had to flip a coin here, I would go with the Bills. I think Josh Allen outperforms Aaron Rodgers tonight.
I'm with you.
I kind of agree with you too, man. We're going to talk about it a little more later, chat, but just wanted to get Ian's 2 cents on something different kind of violence, but
sure.
There you go. All right, man. Well, go follow Ian Parker at Ian Parker MMA on Twitter, on X. Go get involved with everything he's doing with ESPN. You got a show later this week covering PFL. I'm sure you're going to be a busy guy later this week.
Yeah, Jonathan Coachman and I, we just filmed Betting the PFL, our podcast with the Barstool Boys at the Spitting Back Fist podcast. Had a good time with them. And then Coach and I will be doing the pre-show for the PFL on Saturday right before. And then throughout the broadcast, tune in. Him and I will be giving out live bets throughout the entire card.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, man. Go follow Ian. Great having you on, man. We're going to send you off, chat. This is the hype-up video from the PFL for the Battle of the Giants this weekend. It's worth a minute and a half of your time. Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure, brother. Thanks so much for stopping by. We'll have you again and enjoy the fights this weekend, man. Take it easy.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Appreciate you.
Enjoy, chat.
Be on the lookout. Francis Ngannou and Renan Ferreira brace for impact.
Yeah, coming in.
The baddest man on the planet is Francis Ngannou.
Right where I live.
Let's talk about Problema, a Brazilian knockout machine.
I feed my fam. I feed in the meter. They got
The most feared heavyweights on the planet.
Coming in.
A clash of titans here.